Okay, thanks everybody. We're going to have to move on. Caitriona is going to say a few words about our Near East SIG group. Thank you, Caitriona. Thank you again.
Chat time. I'm not an expert. I'm the pracademic, as Mags said, and I'm looking for your help in this session because NERI has affiliated with ESAI to have a SIG called the Action Research SIG of the ESAI. Now, just to recap, we started the SIG in January, and there were kind of three main reasons that we put together for why we felt it was necessary. And one was that we would interrogate and reflect on our professional practice in a nurturing yet challenging environment. So that's what we hope to continue. Thanks, Maureen, it's coming now with the SIG. The second reason we wanted to do it was we felt there was a need to work towards strengthening the rigor of action research for accreditation purposes and also for enhancing institutional standards. And the final one, and this is where I want your help today particularly, is on the idea of ethics, because we have found that we would like to focus on ethics issues and how current ethical standards in educational institutions might impede the undertaking of practitioner action research. And many of our practitioners have mentioned that to us. So we hope to focus on that one today. And thanks to our last speaker for the focus on the I and the idea that we need a lot of reflection around issues that we want to address. So those are the aims for those of you who are new. That's our main focus. And we're going to continue the discussion now. But just to fill you in on what has happened since we launched in January. So it's the Educational Association, Education Action Research SIG of ESAI. So what we did in January was we launched the SIG, and then at our first NERI meeting, we discussed 11 challenges that we had identified for ourselves in action research. And out of those, we came up with the idea that we would try to focus on ethics for our next discussion. And some members in April and May attended the Education Studies Association of Ireland conference in Belfast, and others went to the American Education Action Research Association in Chicago. So what happened at ESAI was that we presented what the SIG was about to all the ESAI members and invited them to partake. And we then held a NERI meet as well. And you can see that NERI meet and the discussions that happened at it. Two of the speakers were Tomás O'Rourke, who's Assistant Secretary General in the Department of Education, and Michelle Vaughan from Florida. And as Mag said, the wonders of the internet has enabled NERI to broaden our discussions into countries that we don't normally be able to travel to. So at the American Education Research Association conference, Maureen Glenn presented a paper at it, and it kind of reflects what Jennifer brought up today about the idea of, the title was Igniting the Spark of Educational Possibilities by Giving Teachers a Researcherly Voice. So it kind of brings back to that idea of voice for teachers. That happened in May and April, and in June we went to RG. That was the Action Research Group Ireland colloquium. It was held in Dublin, and what I learned from that was the importance of looking at non-educational institutions in which action research is happening, and the importance of those both nationally and at an international level. And one of the greatest takes away from it, of course, was the fact that David Coughlin, who is chair of that association, was willing to come here today to talk to us all. So moving on from what we've already done to get to our discussion, and I hope we might have about 15 minutes to chat in our groups online and in the room here, and maybe just give shortish feedback, written feedback, and take some questions. So here's our question. How do we put together ethical guidance for educational action researchers in Ireland? Now, we feel that there's a few different aspects to this, And Maureen and I went to a seminar organised by BIRA, and the words at the bottom of the screen there were words that were coming up at that seminar. Now, BIRA are very often the go-to document for ethical guidance for academic educational research in this country. And we feel that there is a need for our academics to have our own ethical guidelines or some form of ethical guidelines, because not only are we doing action research for accreditation, as you'll see at the bottom, but there's an awful lot of non-accredited action research going on in this country. And if we want to promote it and make it more visible out there, we maybe need to be sure what ethical guidelines we have to have in place for that. So coming out of those two aspects, further questions that you might think about in your discussion are, what do early career researchers who are working in early career in professional development or in school improvement need to know about ethics, both at a procedural and practical level? So what are the basics we need to have in there for them? And the second question is, how might we provide, now I can't see that, Maureen, I'll just move the speakers over. How do we provide this knowledge in a concise and useful way that will be very practical for our action researchers? So if I give you all a few moments to join together, have a few thoughts on that, and then I'll talk to you about how we'll take feedback. Is that okay?
Okay.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I think we're all coming back, and in the room, we're nearly going silent again. So welcome back, everybody. So just in terms of feedback, we would like to take feedback from everybody, but time won't allow that. So what we're hoping to do is that we would get you to write feedback either individually or as your groups. I know you've moved out of your groups now online, but you can write what you remember from the group if you wish in the chat. So those online, if you put your comments in the chat, and those in the room here are putting on post-its, which we will collect. We'll collate those and bring them to our next meeting. Any ideas that we have from there that we can take action on or research further. Does that make sense? If you have any questions, let me know. I see a couple of nods that are very useful there. So just to recap on the question itself, how do we put together ethical guidelines for educational action researchers? And the second part of it is, how can we provide this knowledge in a concise and useful way? So any ideas that you discussed or anything particular to that, please add it to the chat, and we'll take about 5 minutes to do that before we move on to the next presentation on. Thanks to those who've contributed in the chat in the room. They have contributed as well, and we'll try and collate those. So I thank you to everybody. Please continue putting stuff in the chat if you wish, and I'm going to hand over to Maureen now. Bernadette.